When I was a kid, there was a saying, are you a hero or a zero? And that's an interesting thing to think about when it comes to faith, and especially if you put it in the perspective of how does God think about me? How does he think about you? You know, would God think you're a hero or a zero? And if we really ponder, it might freak us out a bit, because if we're honest, we all know that we have this kind of dark filth inside of us. We sin. We do all kinds of things that we'd be ashamed to admit. And if God can see all things and really knows us, am I going to be a zero in his eyes, or am I a hero? Well, we learn a lot about how God views us in the book of Joshua chapter 2. There we learn about a fascinating woman named Rahab. And off the cuff, we might think, well, Rahab is certainly a zero in God's eyes, because we discover right away that she's a prostitute. A prostitute, for crying out loud. She's probably on the lowest rung of our culture, and certainly on the culture back, or in the culture back in her day. And so as a prostitute, we think, oh, certainly she's a zero. And yet, if we read through Scripture, we come to the New Testament book of Hebrews, chapter 11, and there we discover that in God's eyes, Rahab is a hero, not a zero. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what happened? What did Rahab do that made her a hero in God's eyes? And so what takes place in chapter 2 is Joshua sends a couple of spies into the land to spy it out, to scout it out, and discover whether or not they could take this new land that God is leading them to. And there Rahab encounters these spies, and technically they're enemies. But Rahab realizes that these two gentlemen are on God's side. They're serving God. And so rather than Rahab doing what is normal and natural, and what would be normal and natural is to turn these people in to the authorities or whatever, but instead of doing that, she thinks, what would God want me to do in this very unique circumstance? What would God want me to do right now? Not what would my neighbors want me to do, what would the authorities want me to do, what would everybody else want me to do, what would the culture want me to do, but rather, what is it that God would want me to do? And in that, she hides the spies, and she protects them. You see, what we learn in Joshua chapter 2 is that God's people are not the people with the proper pedigree. In other words, in our culture today, we often think, okay, maybe who are God's people? Well, they must be the people that go to church. They must be the people that pray all the time, that never swear, that never get in trouble. That's not what we see from this book. Rather, what we see is that God's people are the people that fearlessly follow him in faith. You see, for Rahab to do this, for Rahab to do what she did, she had to fearlessly follow God in faith, not worrying about what other people are going to think, not worrying about what this is going to mean for her own health or safety, but rather, what would God want me to do in doing that in that situation? And as a result, in spite of the fact that she has this background, in spite of the fact that she's been a prostitute, she becomes a hero of the faith. So are you a hero, or are you a zero? Do you tend to do what the culture wants, what the culture dictates, what everybody else is telling you should do? Or are you a hero? Do you think, what does God want me to do? What is God leading me to do in this situation? And then fearlessly following him in that, no matter what you feel like that is. My name is Eric, and I'm the 5-Minute Pastor.